This is K.M. Wyland, and you're listening to the 125th episode of the Wordplay Podcast. I love the holiday season. I'm not generally much of one for ceremonies or sentimentality, or winter for that matter, but I love December's build-up to Christmas. The crunchy, crispy smell of snow, the Christmas carols, the cookies and apple cider, the gift-giving, and of course the time spent with loved ones. Once again, this year, I'm offering some early Christmas gifts of my own to all my favorite word players. The gifts include a beautiful rustic wood-covered journal, funky and unique bookends, and a writer's blockbuster in the shape of, you'll never guess, a block. To enter the drawing for the gifts, all you have to do is download one of my new short story ebooks, free. 2 of the short stories are historicals, one set in the last days of the American Civil War, and featuring 3 soldiers forced to make a choice between survival and desertion. And the other set in Victorian England, and featuring a street urchin on the cusp of recovering her lost memory when she's dragged into a daring prison break. The 3rd story is a contemporary tale of a daughter facing the loss of her beloved rancher father to invasive leukemia. Each of the 3 books gets you a separate entry for more chances to win. Winners will be announced Christmas Eve. In the meantime, be sure to check out the special prices and package deals I'm offering on my books, ebooks, CD, and bookmarks. These special deals are only available through my website, kmwyland, that's weiland.com, and only until Christmas. The December issue of my e-letter hit inboxes last week. It included the usual roundup of inspirational quotes, creativity jumpstarters, and helpful links, as well as the article, When Writers Shouldn't State the Obvious, and my response to a subscriber's question about how to find beta readers. If you're not receiving the e-letter and would like to, you can sign up for my mailing list on my website at kmwyland.com/mailing-list.php. You can read back issues online at kmwyland.com/e-letter-issues.php. Tips for creating thematic resonance. The latest post in the video series on my blog shows how you can follow Charles Dickens's example in Little Dorrit to strengthen your theme by layering it throughout your subplots. You can watch the video on my blog at wordplay-kmwyland.blogspot.com. New videos are posted every Wednesday. And now I hope you'll enjoy this week's podcast, Most Common Mistakes Series Part 12. Are your flashbacks flashy or flabby? To flashback or not to flashback? Sooner or later, that's a question every writer is confronted with. A good flashback is sometimes just the ticket for bringing to life an important event in your character's past. But constructed poorly or plopped in the wrong place, a flashback can end up irking a reader more than impressing him. Let's search for the signs that your flashback is a glimmering thing of beauty, as well as the symptoms that your flashback is falling flat. Your flashback might be flashy if it occurs at the right time. To pack premium power, flashbacks must be timed at precisely the right moment. Don't give readers the info in your flashback until you've teased them into a semi-invalid state of curiosity, such as Brandon Sanderson does in his slow distribution of information about his protagonist's past as a slave in Mistborn. It's necessary. The bulk of Margaret Atwood's The Robber Bride is comprised of 3 giant flashbacks from the respective POVs of the 3 protagonists. In this book, the flashbacks are so necessary that without them there would quite literally have been no story. Its length is appropriate. The length of a good flashback will depend greatly on the demands of the story. Some will be hundreds of pages, a la The Robber Bride. Some will be only a few sentences, as when the protagonist of The Practice Effect by David Brin remembers being dragged to a lecture by a friend. It's clearly a flashback. Use past participle verbs and other signals such as, and then she remembered, or back 2 years ago when, to make sure readers understand the flashback is a past event in your character's life. Mylena McGraw did a good job of this with her frequent flashbacks in After Dunkirk. Your flashback might be flabby if it would be more powerful told in real time. In an attempt to begin their stories in medias res, inexperienced authors will sometimes open their stories with a flashback that either, at one end of the spectrum, dumps backstory, or at the other end, sums up the story's most interesting information. If your flashback begins just before your story, and is effectively the first domino in your row of falling dominoes, you'd probably be wiser to make it your first official scene, just as Marion Zimmer Bradley did in Storm Queen. It's too long. Although some books, such as The Robber Bride, can get away with ginormous flashbacks, the vast majority of flashbacks have no excuse to be longer than a paragraph or two. Don't jar readers out of your present narrative by suddenly dropping them into an entirely new and disconnected scene. Roger Zelazny's breezy Nine Princes in Amber did a good job giving the reader just the right amount of history to keep the story buzzing along. It's unnecessary. Authors tend to find their characters' humdrum backstories much more interesting than do their readers. If your character's tooth extraction when he was 5 doesn't influence the plot in a crucial way, you don't need to flash back to it. Suzanne Collins's The Hunger Games does a wonderful job flashing back to her character's normal life without including any extraneous or tedious information. It's unclear. If your flashbacks are so subtle readers don't know you're flashing back, they're not going to do your story much good. Clearly signal to the reader when your story is entering a flashback. Use past participle verbs, she had washed the dishes that fateful day, and don't feel bad about point-blank telling readers that your character is remembering, as Marianne Schaffer and Annie Barrows do in the Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society. Flashbacks are not only fun, they can also bring a new depth to your story's palette. If you make sure you're using them correctly, your readers will grow to love these delightful little peeks into your characters' pasts. Thank you for listening to the Wordplay Podcast. To read a transcript of this episode, visit me on the web at wordplay-kmwyland, that's weiland.blogspot.com, and be sure to listen again next week.